Recognize, respect, and give credit due to what was your upbringing, who you were before, how you've developed into the man that you are today, the skills, the pieces that you bring to the table that you value, that you are confident in. Give more respect and recognition to them, because as you do, then you will start to find yourself being even more confident in who you are. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Art of Masculinity. Today, I'm going to talk about something that we have kind of discussed on here, but not really. And that is that, every person out there has an origin story. And one of the things I think that we fail to remember, especially as men, is that story is important. Now, whether you consciously believe it's important or whether you understand that subconsciously it's important, regardless, it is important to you because it's how we value ourselves. And so one of the hardest things I find with men is that we devalue ourselves through first off, not remembering our origin story. And then second off, through comparing our origin story to everybody else's origin story. And then we further devalue ourselves because if somebody had a tougher upbringing, all of a sudden we believe that we aren't as good as them because we didn't have as much adversity. Now, all of this is going to show that it really is a system that we've made up in our own minds to create some form of value for other people, but then also at the expense of our own value for who we are. And once we have broken that down, once we've taken ourselves and devalued ourselves so far, this is where our confidence breaks. And so many men out there struggle with confidence these days. And whether you listening right now do or not, the bottom line is that I get reached out to regularly about men who are struggling with confidence. And it has nothing to do with them being weak, quote unquote, weak men. But what it does have to do with is the fact that those men have devalued themselves and they've also become codependent, right? So there's two different pieces here. But we're going to work on the devaluing because of the fact that I don't believe enough men value their origin story. And when we realize that that is a powerful piece to who we are in our own confidence, in our own structure as an individual, that's when we can really start to build that confidence back. So we have to look at where we came from. And you guys know this, the saying that I love is you got to know where you came from to know where you're going. And that is to really pay mind and give value to the beginnings for good or bad, give values to the beginnings. And so the first thing I have to ask is, where did you start? Because most men haven't taken a look back at this. And this was one of the big things when I was writing my book, but then also that I've been asked a lot, obviously being a podcast host and being on a lot of podcasts, I've been asked tons of times like, oh, hey, take us back to the start. Like, where did this all begin? Or what was it like being you growing up? And people want to use that story because it creates the value for me to their audience. But we seldomly look at this for the value for ourselves. And so when I was writing my book, I forgot about a lot of the pieces I grew up with. Now I remember a lot of the good things. I remember the times that I wish I had back because of the fact that, I believe that while we're in them, we don't really take that moment to absorb everything. And when we look back at all the fun times we had, we're like, wow, that went too fast, right? Like I don't have regret for my decisions. I just have more or less like the idea of saying, wow, I wish I would have absorbed a lot more of that because of the fact that it was so much fun. And time just flies by. Like I'm 36 now and thinking that, high school was 20 years ago for me. And so to think about that and forget those times, and they seemed forever when I was sitting in them, right? But then now I'm like, wow, they just flew by. So that all being said, going on a tangent there, the biggest thing is, where did you start? And looking back at that, now you could have had a really good upbringing. You could have had a stable family, enough money to do whatever you guys wanted as a family, or at least enjoy life to what you believed was good as a family. And there wasn't any struggles or trials or tribulations really that took place. But at the end of the day, we want to still look at that and say that there's a ton of value because you might be an incredibly good person. You might be an incredibly good provider. You might be an incredibly good empathetic person because you had an environment that allowed you guys to really be compatible and to be to embrace kind of that softness and connection as a family. Maybe that was your upbringing, and that isn't bad. You don't have to compare that to somebody that had someone die in their family early on. You don't have to compare that to somebody who was beaten or molested. Like that's not it's not a tit for tat. And so looking at yours, if it was that way, start valuing what that has given you, right? And start saying, wow, I was really given a beautiful mindset or a beautiful perspective on myself and family and life because of the fact that I actually had this really tight connected upbringing. And vice versa, if you're somebody who has had that really tough upbringing, the struggles and the trials and tribulations and the hardships and severe adversity that many people do grow up with, take a look at that and say, what did that give me that made me such a good person today? We don't need to look at the negativity of it, be like, oh, that was really hard. It's like, hey, what did it give me that was really good? How can I look at myself and say, wow, I really value a lot of things in me that were developed during that time that had I not gone through that process, I wouldn't have had that. So it's looking back and gaining value regardless of the spectrum of your history, gaining value of what it was that you went through in your life. And part of that for me was when I went through, and I talk about this again, and I talk about this in my book, but when I started my parents got divorced, and then I was really trying to just kind of stay away from that environment because it just wasn't fun for me. Plus, I didn't have as good of access to be able to go out with my friends and stuff. So I moved in with my aunt and uncle, and they allowed me to basically live with them for a while. And then we put a tent up in the backyard. And a lot of people look at that as like super hardship. Like, oh my God, like you were basically homeless in someone's backyard, right? And it's like, no, I didn't feel that way. And I still don't feel that way. I actually thought it was really cool. But part of that was I've always loved being outdoors. Even as a kid, I've always loved camping and I've always loved those things. And part of that was giving me that ability to enjoy the nature, but also to enjoy that kind of autonomy and freedom of being in that space, in that quiet space, and not being in a house. And part of that allowed me to thrive and be successful in the environments that I've embraced as I grew older, part of that being special operations. So when we look at that, I have a lot of value for it. And amongst many other things that people would think were hard, but I have a lot of value for all the things that I grew up with. But it took me looking back, intentionally writing my book to say, wow, there were a lot of things that I do value and they don't seem difficult. Now, to other people, they may devalue themselves because they look at my past and like, that was really tough, bro. Like, how did you really absorb all that and become a functioning person? But at the end of the day, it was like, no, for me, that was the right thing. That was the right recipe to make a good contributing man to society and allow me to have the future that I did from that point on. And so looking at the value of that, I have to respect where I came from and everything that it brought to my life. And it was harder than some and not as hard as others. And so you have that same opportunity. Your origin story has the ability to give you strength in a lot of areas and to create part of that value system. Now, the next thing I want to take you through is that what makes you who you are today through that value system. So it's saying, hey, I respect a lot of these things because I am good at this, at X, Y, and Z today. And when we pair those up, we start to then create that connection to confidence based upon the foundational pieces that we received early on in our lives. Most of you have not done this because of the fact that you just are absorbed with right now and you're absorbed with typically what's not going right now. And then when you look at yourself, again, you compare to other people. So you feel that if you give yourself value because somebody else had a harder time, then you're kind of weak. Like you're not as good as them. You're not as strong as them. You didn't have to deal with what they deal with. So it's less valuable to you. And in that, I have to caution against it because in that is that whole lack of confidence. So just remember that what makes you today, what makes you who you are today, the good pieces of that, a lot of that is due to the origin of where you came from. And then that comparison to other people is a lot of what tears down that confidence in who you are as you show up as a man, tears down that confidence because the fact that you are devaluing everything around it. And I see guys do this so often. I've done this in my life. I've especially in podcasting, I've experienced a lot of men with really deeply traumatic backgrounds. And they have come from that to be very successful. And especially, this was one of the things that I think is important. A lot of the times when that devaluation takes place, it's because we're looking at somebody we have a ton of respect for, namely somebody who is somewhere in life that we want to be, whether it's financially, relationally, confidence wise, whatever it is, physicality. When they're somewhere that we desire to be, we tend to take that and emphasize the devaluing of our background because of the fact that they are somebody who's exceeded where we currently are right now. And so I want to say that I have done this because being on this podcast and really experiencing a lot of people who have these crazy backgrounds to become very successful, very impactful people in this world today, that has actually caused me to look at my past and be like, wow, it wasn't nearly as hard as theirs, or it wasn't like, who am I to be confident in who I am, or be confident in how I'm showing up today when I haven't experienced that, overcome that adversity, and then and I'm not as successful as potentially they are. Right. And so that all of that combination of things is really where we also have to take into account the pieces that are convoluting our expectation for who we are. It's convoluting the experience that we're having and giving ourselves the presence and absorption of that presence and the experiences to become somebody better, or become somebody that is at those higher levels of goals and accomplishments in our lives. So we really have to take that into consideration as well. And the last piece is you have to respect and give yourself a lot of credit. Recognize, respect, and give credit due to what you were, or what was your upbringing, like who you were before, how you've developed into the man that you are today, the skills, the development, the pieces that you bring to the table that you value, that you are confident in. Give more respect and recognition to them, because as you do, then you will start to find yourself being even more confident in who you are, and you'll stop devaluing the pieces. Now, this goes into a whole other place when we start talking about being intentional moving forward as a man. But right now, it's really about finding this origin story within and leveraging that for your own value, for your own confidence, for developing into an aware man. Because again, we can't know where we're going if we don't know where we've been. And all of that, every piece of that has built us to the point and person that we are today. And if we can't give enough respect to that, then we're not going to respect who we are at this moment, and we're not going to respect who we desire to be in the future. We have to build from the ground up, and to build from the ground up, you have to be able to look back and see where the ground started, because those years, those informative years, you all know this very well at this point, those informative years were where you started to develop as the man that you are today, as the human that you are today. And so if we don't give any recognition to that and we don't try to look back at that, then we are going to be kind of trying to evolve with our hands tied behind our backs. And that's not going to be super efficient, nor is it going to allow you to be super effective in that evolution as a man today. So just remember, the origin story of you is incredibly important, regardless of the spectrum that you're on. Take a look at it and just remember that with it comes the power of understanding who you are as a man and understanding where you want to go as a man. Once you can do that, now we're starting to cook with fire, right? This is kind of that ember. A lot of people, I love this saying, but it's kind of like a lot of people are then they're sitting around a pile of ashes and there's embers underneath and they can feel the heat radiating, but they don't know how to grab that and then to recreate the fire. And this is you recreating that fire. It's taking the embers of the past and elevating them to start burning again so that you can start to put more wood on top and actually create that fire within so you can achieve the heights that you desire to achieve. But until we look back, this is where we are. We will struggle to do that. So all you guys out there, just remember that your origin story is powerful. Regardless of what you consciously try to think right now, subconsciously, it's very powerful for you. And consciously, as we understand it and become more aware, it is incredibly powerful for our evolution. So take that into consideration and don't forget that. All right, guys, if you have not done so, please go ahead and check out my book, Design the Man Within. You can get it over on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Target, Walmart, wherever you guys shop. But I urge you guys to grab it. It is an amazing piece of literature, in my opinion, because it was the book I needed when I started this journey. And I hope it's the book that many men need while they're starting their journey. So to everybody out there, please go get Design the Man Within. If you are a woman listening to this, get it as well. You can learn what we think about as men, but also you might be able to pass this off to your partner in hopes that maybe they'll pick it up and take a look at it and start to read it. So I appreciate you guys. And to everybody who has purchased the book, thank you so much. I am deeply, deeply, deeply in gratitude of you and humbled by the fact so many people have already bought this book. We've been an actual bestseller. We also hit best new release, but we've been an actual bestseller in Men's Health, up at as high as number 13 in Men's Health for bestseller. So really amazing, and just so grateful for everybody who's purchased this book. You guys are making it what it is today. And I hope that so many more people get the opportunity to grab it. If you have bought it, please head over to Amazon and give the book a review, just like with podcasting. Obviously, if you guys haven't given a review for this podcast, please give a review for the podcast as well. But they go a long way to help people see this show and to help people see that book more frequently in their respective apps. So really appreciate that. If you guys could go over, give a review, let everybody know what you loved about the book, give it a 5-star review, and give the app an opportunity to start recommending this to other people. All right, everybody. As always, remember to become a better caliber of man, because the world deserves it.